This is the story of how 3.5 million pages of Jeffrey Epstein documents became the center of a political firestorm in Washington. Attorney General Pam Bondi faced one of the most contentious congressional hearings in recent memory on February 11, 2026, with Democrats demanding her resignation over allegations of a massive cover-up, while newly released FBI documents reveal what Donald Trump allegedly told a police chief about Epstein nearly 2 decades ago. Act 1. The Law and the Release. November 2025 is where this begins. The House of Representatives passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act on November 18th with a vote so lopsided it's hard to believe, 427 to 1, one single no vote out of 428 members. The Senate moved even faster, passing it unanimously just 1 day later, and President Trump signed it into law that same day without reporters present. Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna led the bipartisan effort, and the law gave the Attorney General 30 days to release every Department of Justice file related to Jeffrey Epstein. What came next showed how hollow that deadline would be. The DOJ's initial release on December 19th arrived heavily redacted, with hundreds of pages completely blacked out. Then, on January 30th, 2026, came the flood, over 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images. More than 500 DOJ attorneys and reviewers had worked on preparing the release. But here's what made people furious. The DOJ admitted they'd identified over 6 million potentially responsive pages, which meant they'd released approximately 3.5 million and withheld roughly half. Critics immediately called this a violation of the very law the department was required to follow. Act 2. What's in the files? The sheer volume of material mentioning Trump caught researchers off guard. A New York Times review found more than 38,000 references to Trump, his wife, his Mar-a-Lago club, and related phrases scattered across more than 5,300 files, and that's just in the redacted public version everyone can see. What Congress got to see was different. Representative Jamie Raskin reviewed the unredacted files at the Department of Justice on February 10th and dropped a bombshell. Trump's name appears more than 1 million times in the version lawmakers can access. Raskin walked that back slightly, clarifying he'd searched for Trump, Donald, or Don, and couldn't confirm every mention refers to Donald Trump specifically. Even so, if his numbers hold up, the DOJ redacted more than 96% of Trump mentions before releasing anything to the public. The release turned into a nightmare for Epstein's victims. The Wall Street Journal counted at least 43 victims whose full names appeared exposed in the public files, and more than 24 of them were minors when they were abused. Some names showed up over 100 times. The New York Times discovered approximately 40 unredacted nude photographs of young women or possibly teenagers with faces clearly visible. Brad Edwards, an attorney representing victims, had given the DOJ a list of 350 victims back on December 4th specifically to prevent this kind of exposure. His verdict: there are literally thousands of mistakes. Act 3. The Trump Warning. The Miami Herald broke the newest piece of this puzzle on February 9th with an FBI document from 2019, an interview with former Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Rader that happened 2 months after Epstein died in custody. That FBI interview describes a phone call from Trump to Rader in July 2006, right around the time the Epstein investigation became public knowledge. Trump allegedly opened with, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this," and went on to say he'd thrown Epstein out of his club. People in New York knew Epstein was disgusting, Trump told the police chief, and then he called Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's operative, adding, "She is evil," and to focus on her. When reporters asked about it, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said she couldn't confirm the call happened, but if it did, it backs up what Trump has said from the beginning. The DOJ responded differently, stating they're not aware of any corroborating evidence that the president contacted law enforcement 20 years ago. And that's when things get murky. Representative Raskin found a 2009 email exchange between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell where Trump is quoted saying something completely different. No, Jeffrey Epstein was not a member of Mar-a-Lago, but he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago. And no, we never asked him to leave. That directly contradicts the story about throwing him out. Act 4. The Explosive Hearing. February 11th brought the confrontation everyone had been waiting for. Attorney General Pam Bondi sat before the House Judiciary Committee for approximately 4.5 hours in what turned into one of the most combative exchanges anyone could remember, with Epstein survivors and their family members packing the room. Representative Raskin didn't hold back. As Attorney General, you are siding with the perpetrators and you're ignoring the victims. You're running a massive Epstein cover-up right out of the Department of Justice. Representative Pramila Jayapal asked every survivor in the room to stand if they hadn't met with the DOJ, and every single one of them raised their hand. Representative Ted Lieu accused Bondi of lying under oath after showing her footage of Trump and Epstein together at a party. Bondi's approach was to freight back rather than answer. She refused to apologize to survivors, called the Democratic questioning ridiculous, stated flatly there is no evidence that Donald Trump has committed a crime, and called Trump the greatest president in American history. What happened next raised serious questions about congressional oversight itself. Bondi appeared to have printouts of Representative Jayapal's DOJ database search history right there during the hearing. Representative Robert Garcia called this spying on members of Congress and demanded Bondi resign immediately, calling her a disgrace. Act 5. Bipartisan outrage. The criticism coming from Republicans made the situation even stranger. Representative Thomas Massie, a Republican who co-sponsored the transparency bill in the first place, told CNN that Bondi didn't answer anything. Voices from the MAGA world turned critical too. Kyle Rittenhouse demanded Bondi resign, and pro-Trump podcaster Tim Pool said bluntly, "I think they've miserably handled the Epstein files."
Americans aren't buying what they've been told. A January 2026 CNN poll found only 6% satisfied with what the federal government released. Nearly half of Republicans, 3/4 of independents, and 9 in 10 Democrats said the government is withholding information. 3 months took this from a nearly unanimous bipartisan law to allegations of a massive cover-up. A president who campaigned on releasing the files now says it's really time for the country to get onto something else.